Quick question. You find a bug in your code. What do? New branch, check the error, fix, push, PR, done, right? So that's a sequence, a pattern, a workflow. And in this section, I will show you how we take the workflows you already do and create workflows that Claude will execute for you. Let me show you a real example where you immediately will see the value of a workflow. How do we create these workflows? In Claude Code, we build workflows using what I call custom/commands, stored as markdown files in a special folder called .claude commands. And each file becomes a workflow command you can use. And the file name becomes your workflow command. So fix-bugmd can be invoked by typing /fix-bug and then followed by the bug description. Okay, now let's create together a new workflow to fix this bug here on the login screen of my wedding venue app. And therefore we create a new markdown file. So right click here, new file, and then we type in there .claude/commands/fix-bugmd. And this will create the folders and place the fix-bug markdown directly in the commands folder. Now I copy over my prepared workflow. And can you spot the sequence of steps here? Take a second to look at this workflow. First, we start by understanding the problem. See this arc? That's where I paste in my bug details later. Then we create a GitHub issue and check out on a new fresh branch. Then we work on the fix and also think about it. And then later on in completion, we commit this branch, we link it to the issue and also make a PR. So all the steps I would do manually as a developer. So let's fire up our fix bug workflow. Therefore open up Claude and then start typing /fix-bug. You will also see it in the auto completion. And then what we need to describe here is the error description. And this will be then getting replaced on the part where we define the arcs. I'm using here file mentioning again to be really explicit and also pasting in the error description that I copied earlier from the Next.js error description. So, and while Claude is working on this, you and I, we can both enjoy the sun a bit. How cool was that? Claude followed exactly the steps we defined when working on a fix. Now let's have a look on one more example before we dive into the next concept. Okay, here's the next problem where we need a workflow. Do you see this endpoint? Here we get all the venues. But the problem is this endpoint is not protected. So let's write a workflow that is a dedicated auth helper that gets all the auth knowledge that we have and fix this auth issue. I will now create an AI docs folder and there place a markdown about the authentication mechanism that we use. So in there I define that we use better auth and how we use better auth in our project. Let's create a new workflow by creating a new markdown in the commands folder. I will name this auth helper. And again, I will paste over my prepared workflow statement here. And the first step here is to instruct Claude to understand the security issue, and therefore we make use of the arc placeholder again. And then before we start working, we load the authentication markdown into the context of this workflow. So Claude is aware how we work with authentication. Then we let Claude work on the issue. And afterwards we have a verification step where we decide if it's backend or front-end related and define in there how Claude would check it. So on the backend side, make an API call to check it. And if it's on the front-end side, to make sure that the front-end is not accessible. So let's invoke our auth helper workflow. Again here we type /auth-helper and then followed by the auth issue. In this case I describe that this specific API route is not protected and that we need to fix it. But before we execute this workflow, really let me show you that this endpoint is not protected by making a curl command. And you see we get all the venues back. And here we can clearly see that Claude read our authentication markdown before starting working on a fix. So Claude is now aware of the situation and is start working on this. Now we are here on the verification step, and Claude will make an API call to see if this issue is now resolved. Perfect. And now I also will make a curl command to also show you that this worked perfectly fine. Yep, beautiful. So let's recap what we have learned. Workflows and Claude Code are implemented with the help of custom/commands, and they come in two flavors: project workflows that we worked on and that you share with your teammates, and personal workflows that you put in your home.claude folder, and it applies globally wide for every project you are working on. We define a workflow by creating a dedicated markdown file and put it into the comments folder, and there define every step we would like to take. Use the args placeholder to inject dynamic content, and of course you can use this across your whole workflow definition. And the beautiful part is, since these workflows are only markdown files, we can include them in our version control and then share it with our teammates and together work on them and evolve over time. So pick the most annoying repetitive task you encounter, create a workflow for that, and then please tell me in the comments what it was. And I also want to share this GitHub repository with you, where you can find a lot of pre-built workflows created by the community that you can use as a starting point and also an inspiration for your own. And with this good reference in mind, check it out, play around with workflows, and now let's move on to the next section.